honourable member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Madam Speaker, Statistics Canada just released data showing a sharp decline in per capita GDP last quarter. This is the 6th consecutive quarterly decline. This is a made-in-Canada per capita recession caused by government that stubbornly refuses to listen to everyone from the Bank of Canada to private sector economists. So when will the government start listening to the experts, heed common sense, and start cutting taxes on investment, energy, and income to save Canadians from this collapsing economy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing.
GDP per capita is one measure, and the Conservatives continue to raise it. So let's focus on it for a moment, Madam Speaker. Our country's GDP is in fact growing. On that measure, though, specifically, we exceed GDP per capita by leaps and bounds compared to the UK, to France, and Japan, Madam Speaker. That is World Bank data, and that is IMF data. On the issue of tax cuts, which the Conservatives love to talk about, Madam Speaker, yesterday they had an opportunity to cut taxes for Canadians, all Canadians, and they said no. They showed who they are, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Madam Speaker, last month, National Bank said GDP per capita has fallen by about 4% cumulatively since 2022, which is unprecedented outside a recession. And now the economy is threatened with 25% tariffs that the Chamber of Commerce says could shrink Canada's GDP by another 2.6%. The bigger decline in GDP would come from this government's policies, not for potential tariffs. That's because of its tax hikes on investment and income. So when will the government reverse course, start cutting taxes on investment and income to save Canadians from this collapsing economy?
Madam Speaker, it seems like the member was not in the House yesterday, because actually it's interesting, his question, but the real question that Canadians have in their mind, all those watching, why would the Conservative vote against a tax cut, Madam Speaker? Imagine a tax cut. You know what Canadians are talking about is affordability, affordability, affordability. Yesterday, they had the opportunity to show to Canadians that they are their voice in Ottawa. But what we saw yesterday is that they're the voice of their leader in Ottawa, Madam Speaker, voting against a tax cut at a time where families need support.
The Honourable Member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Madam Speaker, that was a tax cut on consumption, not investment and income. Madam Speaker, U.S. Border Patrol has released alarming data. CBS Boston reported on November 11th that a total of 155 suspects on the terror watch list were encountered at the southern U.S. border in 2024, but double the number were encountered on the northern border and arrested 361. And now Canada is threatened with 25% tariffs because of illegal border crossings. What is this government's plan to protect our borders, our trade, and Canadians from terror?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, our plan is very simple to tackle affordability. That's what we did yesterday, Madam Speaker. We offered a tax cut to Canadians at a time where they need it. But what is shameful and what is on the mind of every Canadian, the question is, why would the Conservative vote against a tax cut? Madam Speaker, I'm sure people are watching at home and they say, they must have been missing something. What's happening to the Conservative? We say, axe the tax, Madam Speaker. Yesterday they had a chance not to do slogan, but to do something for Canadians, and they failed miserably. Madam Speaker, Canadians need a break.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Madam Speaker, after 9 years, this Prime Minister's economic vandalism is the biggest risk for Canadian families. Today, StatsCan revealed that per capita GDP went down for a 6th consecutive quarter. This is a purpose-built recession in Canada in per capita GDP caused by this government's tax hikes and inflationary spending. Supported by the Bloc Québécois, this Prime Minister has caused the worst decrease in standards of living for Canadians over 40 years. He doesn't seem to have a plan. When will he finally trigger elections so we can elect a Prime Minister who does have a plan? The Honourable Minister, Madam Speaker, people watching at home will really wonder where this member across the way, where he was yesterday. Let me be clear, we do have a plan. It's to cut taxes. which is exactly the Conservative slogan, axing the tax. But instead, yesterday, we saw that Conservatives only have slogans, whereas we on this side of the House care about what Canadians care about: affordability, affordability, affordability. Yesterday, the Conservatives missed a great opportunity to show whose side they're on. And on this side of the House, Canadians understand that we know what families are going through. The honourable member from Mégantic-Lérable. Madam Speaker, yesterday, the Conservatives voted against a temporary Band-Aid political maneuver. This is simple electioneering. This is handing out baubles, Madam Speaker. That's what we voted against. Yesterday, we learned that StatsCan has reported that Canadian per capita GDP went down for the 6th quarter in a row. This is a bleak reality. When will the Prime Minister put an end to this economic vandalism, trigger an election, so that we can actually axe taxes and elect a new Prime Minister who actually has a plan for Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Madam Speaker, once again, my colleague is repeating the slogans that his leader has fed him. Our plan is to fundamentally help Canadians who need that help right now. They need financial assistance, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're axing taxes. Why is my Quebec Conservative colleague, why is he so against the idea of axing taxes? Why did he vote against it? Why did all his other Quebec colleagues vote against this idea? Quebecers know that the federal government is here for them. And that's what we're doing, especially during the holiday period. The honourable member
for Kelowna Lake Country.
After 9 years, we're seeing this NDP Liberal government's economic vandalism in real time with new data from Statistics Canada today. Real GDP per capita fell 0.4% in the 3rd quarter in 2024. Per capita GDP has fallen now for 6 consecutive quarters. This is a made-in-Canada per capita GDP recession caused by the NDP Liberal carbon tax housing crisis and job-killing, investment-killing capital gains tax hike. The Prime Minister doesn't have a plan. Will he get out of the way for a Prime Minister who does?
Yeah! The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Housing.
Inflation, Madam Speaker, is back to normal levels. Unemployment levels in this country are around historically low levels. That member continues to talk about GDP per capita like all of them do. On that measure specifically, which has been roundly criticized by economists as not presenting a fair economic picture, but let's look at it. We exceed the UK, France, and Japan. And yesterday, they had a chance to vote for a tax cut for Canadians, and what did they do? They did what they always did. They voted on the opposite side. They don't care about the middle class. They don't care about everyday Canadians.
Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, what that member opposite does not want to talk about is that the new GDP data represents the worst standard of living decline in Canada in 40 years. The Canadian dollar is the lowest it's been in 5 years. And more costs to Canadians are on the way with the new U.S. administration wanting to put a 25% tariff on all Canadian exports. The Prime Minister's response? To hike taxes, like the carbon tax, which will be going up on April 1st, which will make the cost of everything go up. The Prime Minister doesn't have a plan. Will he get out of the way for a Prime Minister who does?
Yeah! The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, I think Canadians respect principle, but they have challenges with duplicity. I know that member to be a strong advocate of small businesses in this country. I know that because she herself was a small business owner. In the past 7 days, we've had the Canada Carbon Rebate apply to small businesses in the terms of thousands of dollars, which is tremendous. Last night, we had a vote in this chamber about axing a tax which reduces the GST on the small businesses that member defends constantly in this chamber. I just don't understand the duplicity when she can't find her conscience and vote in favor of a tax that will help businesses in BC and right around the country.